Good evening, and welcome to this evening's broadcast. Last year, your Office of Alumni Relations created a space to guide and embrace our newest alumni, since our traditions as welcoming them to our alumni community was paused. As we gingerly move through our present time, the From Paws to Claws Alumni Speaker Series remains relevant. Today, we will have another moment of receiving knowledge, and we look forward to your attendance this month and months to come. Each time we have this period, we know and think about each relevant topic that is shown on the screen right now. Each theme supports and strengthens the knowledge of our current students, recent alumni, those who have worn the badge of honor as alumni for years, and friends of Clark Atlanta University. Likewise, we wish to thank the alumni panelists who have presented in the past and those who will be presenting today. We did not seek you out, yet you came running with the spirit of a mighty panther, which we are, sharing your awareness and expertise when the call to participate went forth. Before we move in today's discussion, let me share a tad bit of history on the Office of Alumni Relations signature event. The Alumni Student Networking event was originally designed in 2008 when Kareem Taylor, class of 2010, in his sophomore year expressed that students should be engaged and learn from the alumni of our one exceptional university. Over the years, we continue to call on members of the alumni community to embrace our alumni in waiting, better known as students. We encircle them until they become a member of our alma mater. As Panther Cubs, they develop through discovery, academically, socially, and spiritually, finding their way as their paws grow claws and become fully entrenched felines of service, locally, nationally, and globally, while remembering to provide financial support to the institution that placed them on the paths of well-rounded citizens. There is more to the program and events, which can be found on the CAU website. And speaking of financial support, we are halfway through reaching our $1 million goal for alumni giving. Remember to share your heart with CAU, especially during the month of February. As we begin our discussion this evening, I would like to express thanks to my colleague, Chastity B. Evans, class of 2010, who serves as the program manager in the Office of Alumni Relations. She will be your host, for she created this space for our interaction. Chastity, it is now time for you to begin the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, alumna Galen E. Gatewood Joshua, for the treasured introduction and credible context. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining your Office of Alumni Relations for Demanding Change, How to Communicate Brand Action. An exceptional thank you to alumna Dr. Michelle Rhodes, Program Specialist for the Office of Online Learning and Continuing Education, for being the technical guru behind all of OAR's webinars. Recent events have resurfaced a much needed conversation, not just in society, but also in the workplace. A paradigm shift is happening, and organizations need to communicate both internally and externally what actions they're taking. How your community or company communicates now will impact your brand in both the short and long term. During this recorded webinar, our alumni will discuss best practices for internal and external communications in challenging times, how communicators can get their brand's message across, how the actions you take impact brand reputation, and building brand trust and loyalty. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box and your Zoom control panel now. I will be sure to bring them up during our Q&A section to discuss. Now, without further ado, introducing our first panelist for this evening, alumnus Leon Valentine. Alumnus Valentine is a 2015 graduate of Clark Atlanta University from Washington, D.C. Alumnus Valentine is a public relations specialist and digital strategist with a focus on working with small business and health and wellness clients. Leon has worked with the Boston Celtics, Miss Black USA Scholarship Organization, and he currently serves as a PR specialist for Grammy-nominated singer Selena Johnson, former. Alumnus Valentine currently is the Public Relations Specialist for the American Podiatric Medical Association. That's a lot to say and a lot to do in such a short time. Wow. Thank you so much, Alumnus Valentine, for joining us and for always serving your alma mater and the community. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And super congratulations on your recent position. I think you said it's been about 5 months now.
Yeah, it's been about 5 months, so I'm excited. Yep.
Awesome. And you're already up there kicking butt. I know. So we're going to dive right on into your first question for this evening, if that is okay with you.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, how can PR professionals work with other leaders to ensure that diversity initiatives continue in the future?
Great. So the first thing I'll say is there is a major lack of diversity in public relations as well as different industries. We see it every day, basically, like particularly where you work. I know, like right now, with everything going on in society, there's been a major push for, to show everything Black and to show our culture and many variances in different organizations. However, when it comes to recruiting and diversity, bringing in Black people to work with their offices is very somewhat small to none or very non-existent at times. So I do believe that major corporations understand this and they want to work on it. However, they don't know how to effectively kind of pretty much promote it or work on ways to internally and externally kind of solve this issue. So the first thing that I would say is definitely be research. I definitely think it's time for maybe focus groups, both internally and externally, dealing with diverse people within our jobs. It needs to be outside of the African-American scope. However, talking to people that they're at the current job and also externally while dealing with diversity and inclusion. So talking about things that are just not the typical, like how do you feel about your job, understanding who these people are before they come into the workplace and actually why they're being there as well, because we all know that diversity is much more than just highlighting Black people during February, which is what we usually see in most of these jobs. So I would say definitely focus groups as well as surveys and interviews, and these can be from interviews from people who are the diverse background, but as well as HR, because they may not be well equipped or well trained. Or if someone has been there for 20, 30 years, they might not have the scope of the traditional things of what's going on right now in today's society and how minorities feel, of course, with everything that's going on right now. They may not understand that. So I would definitely say in that scope of work as well. And then dealing and partnering with HR professionals to develop campaigns and initiatives to promote diversity and inclusion, to promote having conversations to talk about what's going on in society and how they feel working at certain companies that may not be as diverse, or they may not feel at home or want to continue at their workplace because of that.
Very interesting concepts. Now I know, with this new climate, there is a lot going on right now to where we now, as the PR people or as the younger person, as they like to call us, that may have a little bit of more of innovation, to understand what is currently going on. And even with you, as the PR professional of color, like how do you convince organizations or corporations that have internal diverse staffing and product offerings to join this external issue, this current climate, what's currently going on?
I think a lot of times, I mean, to simply put it, you have to read the room. I think a lot of times when you're not used to having people in those having those conversations, or really just having one particular person do your messaging for a corporation that isn't diverse, it's hard to tell that through a story because it can be tone deaf or it can just be something that just isn't working. I
Mhm.
would say maybe with social media is a big outlet, so maybe creating a PSA, creating a campaign, or overall just using things to kind of seeing on a more of a communication scope of what are we doing right now to even talk about the issue if they're doing that as at all, maybe creating a campaign or maybe creating a video or some sort of messaging that shows like, hey, our company really wants to talk about this, our company wants to kind of take a step in front of this issue and not be the person who's just not saying anything about it and just hiring, because it's much more than just hiring people. So I would say
Mhm.
on a more quote unquote millennial approach or a 2021 approach, be more digital and visual with it.
Exactly. I agree. I agree. I mean, that is also not where our viewers are and our reach, but that's also where the money is too. So, you know. But thank you so much, Alumnus Valentine, for your astuteness and for your always awesome information. If you
Thank
all
you.
have any questions for Alumnus Valentine, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now, and we will be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you again, Alumnus Valentine. We truly appreciate everything that you're doing right now, and much success to you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Introducing our next panelist for this afternoon, excuse me, evening, I'm sorry, is, is alumna Renee Terrell. Alumna Terrell is a marketing and brand strategist, a distinguished Toastmaster, and CEO of concept marketing firm. She helps business owners, executives, and established authors monetize their message, sell more books, and attract their ideal client through paid speaking engagements. She is the author of Communicating Richly: The Power of You. As an expert trainer and communicator, she has over a decade of experience working with the government, nonprofit, and private organizations. Congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us, Alumna Terrell. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
No problem, and thank you for always continuing to serve your alma mater. We truly appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
So, we're going to jump right into your first question for this evening. How can companies build their brand in an ever changing environment?
Again, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share the stage with such great, illustrious alumna. I'm just even honored to be in the presence of all of you. For me, to build your brand and to change, it's just something that, first of all, you have to identify who your end user is. A lot of people say, well, it's the demographics, they do this, and this is how they are, but you have to take it a step further. What is it about them? What are they feeling? What do they need? What would they be interested in? For example, if it's a family and those are my target market, then what are their needs? What kind of family am I targeting? Is it single parents? Am I dealing with a family that's married with kids? And then take it a step further and clearly define their needs in transitions. For example, this pandemic was a great example of how to do just that. If I'm targeting business owners or people who have to work from home with their children, Progressive did a great example of that when they had the Zoom commercials and they're like, I don't like her. She gets on my nerves. They're like, you're not on mute, right? So that engaged people. People could understand. You also saw it on social media. Different people saying, when it's my turn to talk on Zoom and everyone has their camera on and people are scrambling to put some clothes on or something like that, right? It's connecting with whoever your target market is, but who they are as a person and understanding their needs. Right now, it's something that they say. Maya Angelou has a quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't
Yep.
care about what you say until they know how you made them feel. So if they're not feeling anything, if they're not understanding what it is that you care about, besides the fact that you want them to patronize your business or your product or your service, then that's going to take away from their ability to be able to connect with you and your ability to be able to extend your brand. And the next thing that you have to make sure that you are is consistent in your messaging and consistent in what it is that you do. People should be able to clearly identify you, your business, your brand, no matter where they see your information, be it on a social media platform or even just in an email. The colors, the alignment, everything should match because you want people to be able to see you and know you, just like when they see the M arches of McDonald's. And last but not least, Leon said it good. He said it best: when you want to make sure that you are digital and visual, you have to be, if you're not on the digital screen, you just don't exist. Because even when you're looking to work with people, you want to know something about them. Do they exist? Is it a real company? Do they have a real background? You want to be able to identify and know who it is that I'm dealing with and what it is that I can expect to receive from them and their services. And I think, again, if you identify your end user, you be consistent, and you bring yourself onto the digital platform in some kind of way, you will see your brand grow, and you will continue to grow no matter what the environment changes.
I agree. Oh my gosh, it's all about identifying the end user. So that's gonna be my hashtag for the night. It's like maybe in two to three business days, maybe. Okay.
Right.
So, what can executives do to communicate their stance during turbulent times, such as social unrest?
Well, that's a great question. Again, my fellow alumni, Leon, touched on it, but definitely first tapping into the core values of your organization. It's just like the vision, which is bigger than myself. It's bigger than individuals. It is about what are the core values. And then saying, if our core values, which are the principles which we guide our organization, are integrity and accountability, that crosses across all types of issues and situations because it's something that everyone can attach to it. And that's also very important because statistics show and support that people want to support organizations that support the causes and their social issues that they feel are important. The next thing is that internally, you can have listening sessions. Leon talked about having focus groups, really just talking with your managers, your leadership about training, looking for blind spots, and how you can really address those issues. And it doesn't mean that you have to move the entire Titanic, the entire company, just because someone made a suggestion. But maybe it means that you put the sign up in the lunchroom that says, hey, do not cook fish in the microwave, right? Listening to simple concerns of your employees and those feeling like you're being heard. When a customer is upset or irate, the only thing they want to be is just validated. Doesn't mean that you associate and approve it. It just means that I hear you, I recognize it's important to you, and I'm going to do something, even if it's just listen and think about it, right?
Exactly.
Internally, you can tap into cause marketing, which is something like that. People like Leon said, Ben and Jerry's has started to do it, where you pick a cause and you tap into it. And that goes one way because people like to patronize those who, everything Black and all of that. But it also could be on the opposite end if other people feel like they are on the disadvantaged side of your cause. So that's where your other option is: shift back to your core values. We believe in accountability. We believe in integrity. And then you share that information with your external customers, with your clients, with those who you could work with. They'll then take that and say, hey, they still tap into the things that I believe is important, and I can still patronize them. So it just is about where your organization is, who is your end user, and how you want to utilize that moving forward to be able to achieve your goals and your company's goals and just grow toward the success that you all desire.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I love it. We're looking forward to this book that's going to be coming out soon. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, it's out.
Part 2 of that one. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
I'm with
Yeah. You. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Alumna Terrell, for the essential tips and your materials. And your help and information and all that you're doing. So that, yeah, I'm over here taking notes from you and Leon. Like I got them all ready. So when I get ready to go ahead and unload it all on Miss Joshua next week, she's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, I took my notes too." If you all have any questions for Alumna Terrell, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now, and we'll be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you again so much, Alumna Terrell. We really appreciate you. Introducing our next panelist for this evening is alumnus Kevin Terrell Hurd. Alumnus Hurd is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, where he received a BA in Public Relations. In 2018, Hurd received his MBA from Wash College. He works as the Diversity and Engagement Program Manager for Gannett, USA Today Network. In 2013, alumnus Hurd founded the Detroit Regional LGBT Chamber of Commerce, where he is currently the board president. In 2020, alumnus Hurd was one of the Business Equity magazine's top 40 under 40 LGBT professionals in the USA. Wow, congratulations. You can always follow alumnus Hurd on Twitter and on IG at I am Kevin Hurd. And I'll definitely place that in the chat. So, he's an amazing person to follow. He's always doing great things in the community and always representing the people that need to be represented, which is all of us. So thank you so much, alumnus Hurd, for joining us today and for always serving your alma mater. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Chastity, for that introduction.
Awesome. No problem. Thank you. So we're going to go into your first question for this evening as well, if that is okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Awesome. So is it important for communicators to track of what their competitors are doing and saying around social change, in your opinion?
So I'm going to take this as a different approach. At times of social change, you should not look at your competitors as such. You should look at them as coalition builders. You should look at them as partners, both because you guys serve a certain interest within an industry. You want to make sure that you are building that relationship with them. So not only are you saying that this is an issue that a lot of our employees are having, but also this is something that we can actually do and use our brand and our voice to actually speak for the unheard communities around our country. So, for example, leaders must realize that the customers and vendors are all looking for them to reinforce their values or give them direction. And it's very pivotal for companies to get this right on the first time. So, for example, climate change, let's just say that. Coke, Pepsi, Keurig, and Dr. Pepper have all joined together to get every bottle back that they serve, design their bottles, and recycle them fully, even the caps, right? Did you know how to properly recycle a bottle before this? It was based on plastic numbers. They needed to be clean. The caps had to be separated. The labels had to be off. These organizations and competitors or coalition builders joined forces to solve this issue of the industry. One, it was cost effective for all of them to do it. And for two, they saved the environment. They're saving the environment by using less plastic. And so another example will be the tragic death and murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, say her name, and countless others. You were astonished on social media about how many brands worked together to stand against racism at this time. Every logo was blacked out. And because we knew that every person in this nation and every company in this nation knew that racism was wrong. So it's very pivotal for us to understand that these things really take hold of what we need to do as brands. And so if there is a social issue, we do need to look at what our competitors are doing, but we need to bring them in as partners so we can be on the right side of history.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, you could not have said it any better. So what can PR pros do to help combat this within themselves, their teams, and their organizations?
Well, thank you for that question. And working for a media organization, we are always having these conversations. A little bit background about what I do as a diversity engagement program manager for USA Today Network is that my job is to actually help grow all of our employee resource groups. So I look at all the diverse employees that we have and make sure that their voices are heard up into the C-suite of our organizations. So the first thing that I would say to combat how can PR pros combat that within themselves is research, research, research. The song or the line in the song called "Do Your Research" is really one of the things that really dings in my head. And something that Dr. Brenda Wright drilled in our head with the race process as well, being that you have to do your research before you can even create any type of plan in order to survive in this kind of PR world. So research is first. And many white allies, I'm going to bring it to race for a second, many white allies may be coming to us asking us how they can be a ally and how can they help. And the one thing that we as Black people continuously can be exhausted by them asking these particular questions over and over again, asking us for something they can do themselves. So the one thing that I would definitely say is that we should definitely say, we may be exhausted, but we should direct them in the right direction on where they can do their research to resources that we actually understand and that we actually have vetted, and say that this source can actually speak to these issues you're trying to uncover. So the second thing is action for PR pros. One of the things that I would definitely say is get to your leaders and clients immediately and have an open and honest discussion about how they feel about these social issues that are happening around America. When you have that knowledge and that research and you fully kind of understand where you're going with this, you can actually mentor and talk to that leader and open up their mental models and understand like where they are and bring them up to speed if they are completely unaware of their privilege or completely unaware of how to actually lead a team into a more of a more neutral area. The third thing is create an effective communication plan behind that. And when I say an effective communication plan is make sure that you're listening to your employees. One of the things that our CEO, Mike Reed, did when we were thinking about having a conversation and speaking out against this, being a media organization, we have to be non-biased. But there is something that we can do on a corporate level. We own media organizations, but we have a whole other 10,000 other employees that are not a part of the content org at all. So what we did was we had a conversation with our CEO and C-suite, and then he brought it to the board of directors. And with our ERGs led by African American Forward ERG, we were really pushing him to do something. And he did. If everyone were to go to usa.com/takeaction, you would see a curated resources done by the USA Network about how we can all take action. And it was a public stance for our organization to say that Black lives matter. And then evaluation is the last part of the race process, of course. See where everyone is. Take a temperature check around your organization, as well as your customers and vendors around the country.
Wow. Thank you so much, Alumnus Heard. I mean, we are over here. We are definitely learning today. And if you don't mind, please drop that link into the chat, the usa.com/takeaction, just so you know, you never know who's on the call today. They may need to see that, in order to move along with their plans, because we are still on this wave. We're still trying to figure out how to ensure that Black lives matter. So thank you so much for that.
Welcome. Thank you.
No problem. If you all have any questions for Alumnus Heard, please type them into our Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now, and we'll be sure to get to them during our Q&A session. Thank you again, Alumnus Heard, and congratulations on your position as well. We know that it is fairly new, and you are over there rocking it as well. So congratulations. Keep CAU proud. Last but never least, introducing our final panelist for this afternoon is alumna Dr. Ayanna Cummings. Dr. Cummings is passionate about eradicating the malignant diseases of racism, sexism, heterosexism, ageism, ableism, and other ills which plague our society. She has over 21 years of experience as a diversity consultant, specialist, and trainer. In her current role as Director of Diversity and Inclusion with Compass Group at Microsoft, alumna Dr. Cummings serves as a change agent for cultural transformation, She has also served as an undergraduate lecturer for 20 years at various institutions in the northeastern and southeastern United States, including a current role on the faculty at Georgia Institute of Technology and the School of Psychology. Her scientific research seeks to examine the flight of issues affecting and identification of solutions relevant to African Americans and other diverse and marginalized groups. Her research findings give her unique expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion training and consulting strategies and cultural change methods. As a volunteer leader, alumna Dr. Cummings serves as chair of the HR for Change Committee with SHRM Atlanta and as director of diversity, equity, and inclusion with the NBM BAA Seattle chapter. She is a graduate of Hampton University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology in 2000, and Clark Atlanta University, where she earned the MBA degree in marketing in 2007. She also attended City University of New York Graduate Center, Baruch College, where she earned her PhD, MS, and MPHIL degrees in industrial organizational psychology in 2017 and 2014, respectfully. Good evening, Dr. Ayanna Cummings. How are you doing today? And thank you so much for always serving your alma mater, your community, and I feel like this world.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evans. I am so honored to be here among the illustrious panel. As Renee has already stated, it is such a pleasure and honor to be here. Leon, Renee, and Kevin, my hat goes off to you as well for all of your work. All of your efforts combined are a pivotal force for change. I'm so honored and proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So we're going to go into your first question for this evening as well. What has your respective company done to showcase how they support diversity and inclusion and communication branded action?
Well, I want to first clarify what Compass Group at Microsoft is and what we do. Compass Group at Microsoft sounds confusing because Microsoft, as you all already know, is one of the leading technological services providers in the world. Compass Group you may not be as familiar with, but just to fill you in, Compass Group is the leading food services provider in the world. So we have competitors like Sodexo and people like that, but we are the number one in that industry. So Compass Group at Microsoft is a small account at Compass Group that strictly serves the Microsoft account in Redmond, Washington, and it's comprised of about 1,600 associates. So prior to my hire, which occurred in October 7th of 2020, there was no diversity and inclusion director. And so the first step for them after, of course, the senseless and untimely murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and all of the media attention surrounding that, and of course, Microsoft's commitment that was actionably aligned with monetary contributions, community outreach, improving their own diversity and inclusion efforts, and Microsoft being our client, they took the step of hiring a diversity and inclusion director, who was me. So that was step number one. As a part of my onboarding process, I had to go through about 4 interviews, and I proposed to them, using my briefcase technique, a multi-pronged approach that would tackle diversity, equity, and inclusion issues at the company from a variety of angles, so that no one issue undermines the efforts that are, albeit sincere, somewhat ineffective, so to speak. And so the multi-pronged approach is comprised of now 8 prongs. It started out at about 5 and has evolved since I've gotten there, but it includes targeted and structured recruiting. And by structured, we mean actually doing job analyses that address the gaps in the job description and making more inclusive language for the job descriptions and so forth, and actually structuring that approach with a weighted criterion scorecard for evaluation of potential candidates. It means targeting, of course, historically Black colleges and universities like Clark Atlanta University, like institutions that would house culinary arts programs like the Atlanta Technical College and so forth. It is prong 2, training, assessment, and development, which is essentially a pre-test, post-test design with multiple baselines where we're doing surveys over time continuously at quarterly intervals in order to assess where we are, establish a baseline, and then respond by crafting training platforms that teach about unconscious bias and inclusive leadership, but not just in a virtual asynchronous methodology, but with a live trainer where they can actually ask questions, they can actually have conversations with one another in breakout rooms and really contribute to the discussion in a dialogue format. And then of course, looking at the performance appraisal system as one systemic barrier or potential systemic barrier to the graduated development or graduated selection of diverse candidates that go up the career ladder, because we all know we see a lot of diversity at the lower echelons of an organization, and then as you get higher and higher on that ladder, we tend to somehow disappear, whether it be through attrition or the fact that we're just not getting promoted despite our talent and capabilities to perform at higher levels. And so looking at the performance appraisal system, redesigning it, potentially adding a 360-degree component where everybody has to evaluate everybody else, and training people on rater biases that can come into play where, of course, we know that now through research, African Americans tend to be evaluated on different dimensions of their performance than other people. So asking a rater to provide documentation and justification for a rating, giving a behavioral example that actually specifies why that rating was given, and then evaluating them on diversity and inclusion targets that are specific diversity and inclusion outcomes for behavior that we want to see. Did that person display inclusive leadership paradigms as they engaged with diverse teams, things like that. And then on the fourth prong, we were looking at community development, developing a sense of community among associates, like what Kevin does in the development of employee resource groups and a task force on racial and other forms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which were established after I got there. And now we have several, including the LGBTQIA+, the people with disabilities, the allyship group, the women of Compass at Microsoft, the families, the Black, Indigenous people of color. And so the purpose of that is to create a project for them to do, and it gives them a budget, in fact, where they have actually made financial investments for each of the ERGs and task force to operate with. And they can develop initiatives like community outreach with programs that give second chance employment to people with prison records, or give monetary donations, or food, or whatever it is that the community needs. And so that was a pivotal part of these initiatives, because we want the employees to feel like they're a part of this cultural transformation. We can't take this pivot without bringing everybody else along. And they have some voice and contribution to the effort by participating in all of these various ERGs and task force. And then in addition to that, on the community development prong, we've been doing community roundtables. I started my company. I also have a consulting firm called Tapestry Consulting LLC, on the basis of the roundtable dialogue platform, where I invite panelists, just as you all have done for this evening's presentation, to speak as experts about issues that are affecting our community, particularly the Black community. And it was a real eye-opener for me that simply starting by having dialogue about these issues is a step in the right direction. It may not be the end-all be-all, because you want to see actions related to those conversations, but at the same time, if you don't at least have the conversation, which can be extremely difficult in an environment that is predominantly white or is diverse and not predominantly anything, it can be very challenging to have those conversations. And so Compass Corporate refers to it as courageous conversations. I call it critical. So we're bringing up topics that are somewhat taboo in the corporate environment, like George Floyd's murder and white privilege and white fragility. But because our client, Microsoft, is so progressive, I've been given the opportunity to be equally as progressive, basically being myself, in this environment that would otherwise probably not have had an opportunity to do so were it not for the senseless killings of those innocent people last year.
Exactly.
And so then on prong 5, we had a cultural assessment and systems analysis, where essentially I did a qualitative assessment using data from archives, like the documents that are available to the public online for stakeholders like the board of directors, or published to the community who invest in the company on the public platforms like the NASDAQ or the Dow. And I analyzed them according to their objective key results, whether the indicators of their statements and commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion aligned with any actions on diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there's a lot to be said about whether or not there's alignment between your verbiage and your behavior, because oftentimes it doesn't equate. And so we looked at that from that perspective, and I published a 100-some-odd page document that gave scoring on each of those documents with relation to those dimensions. And I'm going to do another one of the learning management system, which is our training platform online for the 600,000 some odd associates that comprise Compass Corporate. And then I'm going to also look at the intranet that is used to disseminate information. Prong 6 pertains to a real critical aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion that is sometimes not discussed, which is supplier diversity. So do we engage our diverse suppliers? How many diverse suppliers do we have? How much are we spending on diverse suppliers? Are we developing them to their full potential in terms of getting them certified, mentoring them to become full vendors and suppliers with our company so that they're more than just what we call P-card spend and things like that? And then prong 7 looks at community outreach more particularly, because we want to reflect to the community this commitment and make visible our commitment to these strategies for cultural change. And then I've added an 8th prong recently that is employee engagement, retention, and recognition, because oftentimes you are looking to retain people and not just develop them, but keep them at the company so that there's not, so much turnover that it undermines your efforts. And so that is what we're doing as it pertains to our actionable and financial commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and communicating our brand action, not only through Compass Corporate, through the internet and other platforms, because we do have a vice president of diversity and inclusion, Adrian Williams, with Compass Corporate, but also through the smaller initiatives that I've just mentioned. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm on mute. My apologies.
Okay.
I said it seems that everybody is winning on this call. Congratulations on your recent appointment too. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was a long time coming, but it's one of those things where you just have to stick to your guns. Whatever it is that you have your sights set on, stick to it, because eventually it'll come to pass. God doesn't bring you that far to leave you. So you wouldn't have gotten to where you are if God didn't have a plan for you.
Amen to that. Amen. So we're going to go to the last question, because I know you kind of touched base on it. I want to say it was during prong 2 or 3, but how do you think bias plays a role in the communication space?
Well, Chastity, when you first asked that question, I looked it up and I said, this is a huge question, because there's so many angles that you can answer that question from, and I think my colleagues like Leon, Renee, and Kevin have already touched on this, but I'll go ahead and take a stab at it too. So really, because we don't have several hours or days to examine it, but what we do have is a brief time frame, and I'm going to try to answer it in that time frame. So again, the literature on the subject is very broad, but here's some insights. Number 1, power and caste can play a role in the dissemination, the format, and the breadth, how, to what extent communication is had at all levels. So whether it be via mass media like the television or the news channels on topics like politics, or the use of social media on things that are relevant to us, communication media can be divided into the categories of time-based and spatial or space-based. And so the key is, with the advent of social media and the technological advances we have at our fingertips, the world has realized a closure of that spatial time distinction so that you have the overlap of the two that would otherwise preclude people from different countries and other land areas to work together from the comfort of their own spaces using the virtual collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams. And so now, of course, it takes less time to send a quick email over to London, England than it did in the 80s when you had to mail a stamped letter through the post office.
Exactly.
Furthermore, our access to information, particularly technological access, is crucial. But if you were to examine access from a stratified socioeconomic perspective, like let's say the lower caste in India, you begin to uncover the discordance between the type and the quality of information that people from underserved communities have access to and are able to thus digest and interpret for their own use and benefit. So this in and of itself can present another dimension of bias, not just along racial and ethnic lines, but along socioeconomic lines as well. Furthermore, bias is inherent in our access to information. So what we're told by media and what truths lie therein can differ. And we have to remain abreast of that as consumers of any form of media and be willing to engage in a further vetting process of the information that we consume for its veracity. And now to the quick question I think you're asking, which pertains to bias in communications, particularly relevant to corporations. When we communicate using organizational channels, be it internal or external to the corporation, there are additional considerations. For example, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can be the language, as I think I said before, in the job description that we're using, that can be gendered language as opposed to gender neutral language for an engineering job, for example. Is it inclusive? Is it free from bias? Is the format of the communication, for example, on Microsoft Teams, are we using the transcriptionist service or do we have an interpreter to do American Sign Language to provide accessibility to people who have certain forms of disability or various impairments? And then furthermore, the frequency with which the information is disseminated, the channels used to disseminate it, and other important considerations all go into that umbrella. So I think I've already talked about job descriptions. Now what's available to the public is a job decoder, where you can go to a website, enter the job description language into the online decoder, and it pops back to you a response as to whether the language used is gender inclusive or needs to be revised. And the same can be done with other demographic variables like race and so forth. But when we assume, for instance, that written communication is preferred because that is the medium that we prefer, we're imposing our own biases on other people. Also, if we assume that communicating well in advance of a kickoff of a new project or initiative is the best way to distribute information about that initiative, but the employees really feel that learning of the project too far in advance will apply undue stress or pressure on them and create unnecessary anxiety, then once again, we have imposed a bias in how and when we communicate. Furthermore, branding in the corporate space is an important topic because after George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor's murders, many companies emphasize their diversity, inclusion, or what is now called JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion efforts to advance racial justice and racial equity. They had to communicate that to the public, these additional commitments that they were making. And particularly for Black Americans, the fact that most of the communications provided reference to some financial incentives or grants as a part of the broad community outreach efforts, it was relevant. And while companies sought to create a positive image, the manner in which that information was communicated had to be interpreted or perceived by members of the Black community at large. And so it was an important consideration that went into how they said what they said. And furthermore, an even well-intentioned effort can fail because of the perceptions that they create. For instance, what did Aunt Jemima as a brand communicate to Black people when it was first developed? Aunt Jemima communicated the sense to many of us that the stereotypical mammy was not a dead stereotype for Black women, and that this image and portrayal of Black women was still alive. So oftentimes the communication is subtle, and then other times it's very overt, like Aunt Jemima. But in any event, the effect can be the same. It can have a lasting impact on the brand's image and sustainability in the marketplace if it's not carefully thought out prior to its development and placement in that marketplace. So
Awesome.
Does that answer the question?
Oh my gosh. Look, I think I'm more, like you said, that is a lot. And each and every last one of you all, although you've touched based on it, I mean, I've received like a different output, you know, or different perspective from each person because although we're kind of in similar industries, we're not. So it's just good to see that type of output and perspective. So thank you,
Awesome.
Dr. Oh my God.
You're most
Harry,
welcome. I'm very happy that it answered the question because I was afraid
like,
it might not.
like Kevin said, research. So I'm
That's right.
probably sometime tonight, I'm gonna go and do some more research on it.
He's right about that. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, alumna Dr. Commons, for breaking it down and for bringing your awareness. If you all have any questions, no problem at all. And thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule. If you all have any questions for alumna Dr. Commons, please type them into your Q&A box in your Zoom control panel now, and we'll be sure to get to them during our Q&A session, which it looks like it's about now. So thank you again to our awesome alumni panelists for their insightful gems that have been released today to go forth with you all on this call. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your Zoom control panel. Now is the time to engage with your alumni and to network. So it looks like we have a few questions. So this question is pretty much for anyone. It's from alumna Sandra Brooks. She said, recent branding and marketing ads that focus on the family are highly utilizing interracial couples. Are there any concerns from the panelists that the message of diversity is being diluted with these images? Or is it no longer important to represent diversity by individual ethnic groups? Anyone could take a stab at it.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I have mixed feelings about those messages because I've had the same notice when I watch commercials nowadays. The most that I see is the pairing of a Black man with a white woman. Sometimes you do see a Black woman with a white man, but the majority of the interracial couples have a white woman and a Black man. And so on the one hand, I think of Emmett Till and so many other young Black men who were murdered because they expressed any communication or interest or had anything to say to a white woman. And that stems from slavery all the way on up through Jim Crow and into present day. And so I think of it from that perspective in the sense that, you know, why not show a strong Black family together and thriving in love, so to speak, because of all that we have struggled and had to go through as a unit when it comes to the Black family. On the other hand, multiculturalism and multiracial people will be a vast, I don't want to say majority, but will be a vast percentage of the population by about 2045. So in about 25 years, there are going to be more mixed people than there are some other, you know, singular racial ethnic groups. And so the question is, do the children of the multiracial families who are also often depicted in the commercials identify as multiracial? What is their identification? You know, I have all of those types of questions and concerns in my mind, but I don't think there's one definitive answer. And I don't think it's malintended. You know, at the foundation or core of that strategy, I think is the notion that we are all supposed to be together and, you know, belong together in this environment that is multicultural. And so I can appreciate the core of the issue that the intention is good. So, you know, I see it from a variety of angles.
Thank you.
I would like to chime in on here as well. I definitely agree with Dr. Cummings in her perspective, especially when you see the Black man with a white woman in several interviews or several commercials. And then you typically see the Black woman, if she's in a commercial, she's by herself. So it's kind of, you know, reinforcing that single mother, Black single mother kind of mentality or situation. But I want to go even further. I do a presentation on marketing do's and don'ts. I've done it a couple of times here in the city of Detroit. And one of the marketing do's and don'ts that I noticed is that if you're going to have a multicultural kind of conversation or a marketing campaign, be that as a poster, a commercial, or any kind of literature, you want to make sure that there are multicultural people in the room planning that. Prime example, one of my one of the funniest commercials, one of the ones I cringe at every single time that I watch it, is this particular Subway commercial. This Subway commercial is the white CEO or manager running into his office and locking the door, so his other three coworkers or what you can say subordinates won't be able to get a piece of his sandwich. And then what they do outside of that door is reinforce stereotypes. The first person says, "You won't be able to use my stapler anymore," but that person happens to be a white woman, reinforcing that she is subordinate and only can assist him and actually helping him do his job. The second one is Indian man says, "You won't be able to do my calculator," reinforcing the stereotype that Indians or South Asians are good at math. And then the one I think is most egregious, because I am a Black man, was the Black man saying that "You won't be able to use my paper waste basket basketball hoop anymore," reinforcing the stereotype that only Black men are good at sports. So that's something that I cringe at every single time I see that particular commercial. Another commercial example was the Dove commercial of the woman or the women of the Black woman starting off. It was good intended, starting off be good in the skin you're in, but then she pulled her skin off and revealed a white skinny woman, which is the inherent kind of the bluest eye kind of concept that I wanted to be white. You know, and it reinforces a negative stereotype that Black women is inside of us or inside of Black women are skinny white girls. And honestly, there has been some focus groups done about that commercial that actually stated that if they were to reverse the roles, the colorism within that group, it probably would have been reviewed a little better. But still, the removal of any type of person's skin and not show the humanistic quality of that person is still a marketing faux pas for me, myself. So I just wanted to reinforce that as well.
Good, great points, great points. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Second question is also from Alumna Brooks. She says, what would be a guesstimate of the number or percent of corporations participating in supplier diversity programs? Anyone could take a stab at this as well. And, you know, just check, we're 3 minutes to 6.
Yeah, I can actually take this one. Being a chamber corporate partner, a chamber leader of a diverse chamber, a lot of organizations do it. What I'm putting inside the chat is actually 3 organizations that you can go onto their website. And they are organizations that either certify minority-owned businesses or call to action corporations to develop a supplier diversity program. So specifically for the $1 billion roundtable, they're the call to action. So anyone that's on that particular website, those corporations are actively seeking diverse suppliers to be a part of their vendorship. And what the $1 billion roundtable call is to ensure that some really Fortune 500 or Fortune 200 companies are really literally spending $1 billion minimum on supplier diversity. And then the other two, NGLCC, which my chamber is a local affiliate of, we actually certify LGBT-owned businesses. And to be a certified business in any of these organizations, you have to be 51% owned and operated by a member of that community. You also have to be a United States citizen, and you really have to be a legal business as well. So you have to have your documentation on point. And I do several site visits for the LGBT community here in Michigan, and then it is a national certification. And the National Minority Supplier Development Council, they certify minority-owned businesses. Now, many companies and many states and municipalities, they may have operations and laws that forbid them to show preference towards bidding on contracts for minority suppliers. But some organizations in some states are really progressive in that. Specifically, California is progressive on LGBT suppliership when it comes to the public utilities. They must include LGBT suppliers and other minority suppliers within providing contracts for businesses, small businesses. So I'm in this space every single day. We're actually having something called the Colors Conference happening on March 13th and 14th of this year, which will talk more about diversity and inclusion, supplier diversity, and HR policy from an LGBT lens, but also intersectionality lens as well. And so if you guys are interested in that, you can go to DetroitLGBTChamber.com and find out more about the conference. The conference website will be launching in the beginning of March.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Any closing words, Alumnus Valentine or Alumna Terrell? All right, awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for the questions. Please stay in contact with our alumni attendees, and also look out for any upcoming events and CAU Share Your Heart in partnership with HBCU Cares Giving Campaign to reach our $1 million goal. Our social media is up for the month of February, so please visit all of our social platforms or visit our website, www.cau.edu/alumni, or check your emails to definitely share a piece of your heart. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you for being here today. Special thanks to my colleagues, Senior Director of Alumni Relations, Alumna Mrs. Galen E. Gatewood-Joshua, and to Alumna Dr. Michelle Rhodes for their stellar service, and to our panelists for a remarkable job today. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your support and joining us again on February 25th. Have a great weekend.